Nero Wolfe and the Roast Goose Mystery. It was a Wednesday morning, December 22nd, and the brownstone at 918 West 35th Street was engaged in its usual rituals with the kind of precision that would make a Swiss watchmaker weep with envy. I sat at my desk in the office, ostensibly reviewing the monthly orchid expenses, but actually watching Caesar and Mars negotiate territorial rights to the space directly in front of the radiator, a negotiation that had been ongoing since November and showed no signs of diplomatic resolution. Caesar, being the alpha and approximately the size of a small horse, simply walked to his preferred spot and lay down with the casual authority of someone who'd never questioned his right to the best of everything. Mars, the enforcer and only slightly smaller, circled twice, snorted once in what I interpreted as Doberman for "we'll discuss this later," and settled for the second best position with the dignified resentment of a vice president who knows the promotion will never come. Apollo, the scout, was somewhere between the front hallway and the kitchen, conducting his perpetual patrol of the brownstone's perimeter with the restless energy of someone who'd drunk too much coffee and not enough common sense. Minerva, the strategist, observed from her position near the office doorway, her dark eyes tracking movements with the calculating precision of a chess master contemplating a particularly complex endgame. Diana, smallest and fastest of the Dobermans, was upstairs performing her self-appointed inspection of all window latches, a task she took as seriously as most people take their mortgages. And Loyal, the 45-pound brick-red pit bull with the white blaze on his chest and the notched ear that suggested a past more complicated than his current domestic bliss, was precisely where he always was at this hour, in the kitchen with Fritz Brenner, hoping that culinary genius occasionally manifested as dropped food. The brownstone itself was buttoned up for winter like a fortress preparing for siege. The windows weren't just closed, they were bulletproof, triple-paned, and designed to stop anything short of a military-grade assault. The mirrors throughout the house were similarly reinforced, because Wolfe believed that if someone was going to shoot at him, they shouldn't get a ricochet bonus. The locks were reinforced steel, the security system was state-of-the-art for 1954, and the overall effect was less cozy Manhattan townhouse and more diplomatic compound for paranoid millionaires. Outside, snow was falling in that perfect fat-flaked way that made Manhattan look like a Christmas card, painted by someone who'd never actually experienced New York winters. It was beautiful for approximately 45 minutes, right up until the taxis and delivery trucks turned it into the kind of grey slush that made you question your life choices and consider moving to California. The office smelled like furniture polish, old books, and the lingering aroma of this morning's breakfast, which had involved Fritz's Eggs Benedict and enough hollandaise sauce to give a cardiologist nightmares. The room was warm, comfortable, and exactly the kind of space where you could forget that 3 floors above, Nero Wolfe was probably arguing with an orchid about its refusal to bloom according to his schedule. I heard the elevator descend at 11 o'clock sharp. Wolfe's morning routine was as predictable as sunrise and considerably more dramatic. The elevator doors opened. Wolfe emerged wearing a yellow shirt that would have looked ridiculous on any other human, but somehow worked on his 1/7 frame, and he navigated around Caesar with the practiced precision of a man who'd performed this exact maneuver approximately 4,000 times. He settled into his custom-built chair behind his desk. The chair creaked, it always did, accepting his weight with the resigned dignity of furniture that knew its purpose, and arranged some papers with the kind of unnecessary precision that suggested he was in a good mood. When Wolfe was angry, he didn't touch things. When he was satisfied, he organized them. "Good morning, Archie." "Good morning. The orchid expenses are reasonable this month, assuming you consider spending more on flowers than most people spend on rent to be reasonable. The phalaenopsis requires specific nutrients. Quality is never unreasonable." "That's going on your tombstone. Quality is never unreasonable. Also, I weighed a 1/7 ton. You're in a peculiar mood." "I'm in a Christmas mood. Fritz has been baking things that smell like heaven, got a Michelin star. The whole brownstone smells like gingerbread and existential satisfaction. Fritz is preparing for the Pemberton Foundation dinner on Saturday evening. He has been planning for 3 weeks. I knew about the dinner. It had been the primary topic of Fritz's conversation for the better part of a month. The Pemberton Foundation was one of those blue-blood Manhattan charity operations that threw elaborate events where wealthy people paid ridiculous sums to eat expensive food while congratulating themselves on their social conscience. This year's Christmas gala had a Dickensian feast theme, and Fritz had been commissioned to prepare his legendary roast goose, the same recipe that had once prompted a French diplomat to offer Fritz a position as personal chef to the Élysée Palace. An offer Fritz had declined with the diplomatic explanation that he was already employed by someone more interesting than the President of France. I assume this is advertising. This is Pride, Archie. Each plate will bear a small card reading, prepared by Fritz Brenner of the Brownstone. Fritz views this as an opportunity to demonstrate that his artistry extends beyond this household. How many people? 80 guests. The dinner is at the Hotel Carlyle. The foundation is paying Fritz's fee plus expenses, which means he purchased ingredients that probably cost more than my monthly salary. Your monthly salary is 0. You own the brownstone. The principle remains. Fritz's Syrian anise-flower alone costs $75. For spice? For artistry, the anise-flower is essential to the goose's preparation. It provides a subtle licorice note that complements the bird's natural richness. Fritz imports it personally from a supplier in Aleppo who has been servicing this household for 20 years. Fancy, necessary, quality is never unreasonable. I know. Should I embroider that on a pillow? Wolfe's response was interrupted by the telephone, which rang with the aggressive insistence of someone who believed their call was more important than whatever else might be happening in the universe. I picked it up. Nero Wolfe's office. Archie Goodwin speaking. Archie. It was Inspector Kramer, and his voice had that particular quality, tight, controlled, angry, that meant someone was either dead or soon would be, and he was already tired of dealing with the paperwork. I need Wolfe, now. I covered the mouthpiece and looked at Wolfe. Kramer, sounds like someone stole Christmas and left a body under the tree. Wolfe scowled. He hated interruptions during his settled hours, but picked up his telephone. I stayed on the line, standard operating procedure for calls that involve police inspectors and bad news. Yes, Mr. Kramer? Wolfe, I'm at the Hotel Carlyle. We've got a situation that involves your chef, and before you tell me it's none of your concern, let me explain why it absolutely is your concern. Wolfe's expression shifted fractionally, from annoyance to attention. Continue. Last night was the final preparation session for Saturday's Pemberton Foundation dinner. Your man Fritz brought his goose, the actual prepared bird, and left it in the hotel's secure kitchen, with their executive chef supervising. Standard procedure for high-end catering. The goose's sauce was in a sealed ceramic container, Fritz's own vessel, stored in the walk-in cooler overnight. Sensible precautions. Would be sensible, except this morning at 7:30 a.m., Theodore Pemberton, that's the foundation chairman, man who's bankrolling this whole operation, decided to conduct an early quality inspection. He came to the hotel kitchen with his assistant, opened the cooler using his own key, and insisted on tasting Fritz's preparation sauce, against the advice of the hotel chef, I might add. And 30 minutes later, Theodore Pemberton collapsed in the hotel lobby. He's currently at Lenox Hill Hospital in serious condition. The preliminary toxicology results suggest alkaloid poisoning, possibly from the spice mixture in Fritz's sauce, specifically something that mimics the appearance of whatever exotic ingredient Fritz was using. There was a long silence. Outside, I heard Apollo's claws clicking on the marble hallway floor. Inside, I heard Wolfe's brain engaging with the kind of focused intensity that usually meant someone was about to have a very bad day. Fritz's spices are sourced from reputable importers with decades of established reliability. He tests every ingredient personally before use. The possibility of accidental contamination is effectively zero. Then we're looking at deliberate contamination, which means someone poisoned your chef's Christmas goose with the intent to either kill Theodore Pemberton or destroy Fritz Brenner's reputation. Possibly both. The hotel kitchen is currently sealed as a crime scene. Fritz's name is attached to an attempted murder investigation, and the police commissioner wants answers before the press turns this into a headline about poisoned society dinners and incompetent food safety protocols. I do not make house calls, Mr. Kramer. You know this. Then send Goodwin. But I'm telling you right now, if this investigation goes badly, if we can't determine how that sauce got contaminated, Fritz Brenner's name is going to be permanently associated with attempted murder. The Hotel Carlyle will sue. The Pemberton Foundation will sue. Every society matron in Manhattan will refuse to let Fritz within 100 yards of their kitchens. His career will be over. Thought you might want to prevent that. He hung up with the aggressive finality of someone who'd made his point and didn't care whether you liked it. Wolfe placed his telephone down with surgical precision, the kind of careful movement he employed when controlling significant anger. His face was composed, but I'd worked for him long enough to recognize the signs. Someone had attacked his household, used Fritz as an instrument, and threatened the brownstone's reputation. In Wolfe's hierarchy of offenses, this ranked somewhere between personal insult and declaration of war. Archie, your coat. Going to the hotel. Obviously, someone has committed either gross negligence or deliberate malice, using Fritz's artistry as a weapon. Determine which. If negligence is involved, document it thoroughly. If malice is involved, identify the perpetrator so I may dismantle their life with appropriate prejudice. You're taking this personally. Fritz's professional standing represents this household. An attack on his reputation is an attack on this brownstone. Find out who is responsible, Archie. Use whatever resources necessary. If you require my participation, call. Otherwise, gather information and return with a complete report. I stood, grabbed my coat from the hall rack, and was halfway to the door when Fritz appeared from the kitchen, his face pale beneath his chef's toque, his hands clutching a wooden spoon like it was a talisman against disaster. Loyal trotted beside him, sensing distress the way dogs always do. Some combination of scent, body language, and canine intuition that makes them better at reading emotions than most humans. Archie, I heard the telephone. Is there trouble with the Pemberton dinner? I looked at Wolfe, who gave me a fractional nod. Permission to explain. There's been a complication, Fritz. Theodore Pemberton tasted your goose sauce this morning at the hotel. He got sick, seriously sick, poisoned, according to the preliminary tests. Kramer's at the hotel now treating it as attempted murder. Fritz went completely still. Not frozen, exactly. More like someone had hit pause on a film. His expression cycled through confusion, disbelief, horror, and finally settled on something that looked like personal betrayal. My sauce. That's impossible. I prepared every element myself, Archie. Every ingredient measured, every temperature monitored, every step executed perfectly. I have been preparing that sauce for 3 weeks. There cannot be poison. I believe you, Fritz. But somebody apparently didn't want your goose to be perfect. Somebody wanted either Pemberton dead or your reputation destroyed, and they used your Christmas preparation as the weapon. I'm heading to the hotel now to find out who and why. But my spices, the Syrian anise-flower, I purchased it myself from Hassan at the Levantine Spice Company. I tested it personally. I would have noticed any contamination. Would you notice if someone substituted something that looked exactly like your anise-flower, but wasn't? Fritz's expression shifted to something approaching horror. You think someone switched my ingredient before I used it? I think someone's very clever and very mean, and they knew exactly how to make this look like your mistake. That's what I'm going to find out. Wolfe spoke, his voice carrying that particular tone that meant someone had made a serious error and would regret it thoroughly. Archie, Fritz's professional reputation represents 2 decades of artistry, and this household's public standing. If malice is involved, identify it completely. If conspiracy is involved, document every participant. If incompetence is involved, catalogue it for potential litigation. This is not a request. Got it. Defend Fritz's honor, identify the villain, and make them wish they'd chosen a different chef to frame. Precisely. Now go. I went. Behind me, I heard Fritz return to the kitchen with Loyal following close, the pit bull's steady presence offering the kind of comfort that only dogs can provide. Caesar opened one eye as I passed, decided I wasn't worth the effort of a full acknowledgement, and went back to sleep. Mars didn't bother looking up at all. The snow was falling harder now, and Manhattan was beginning its transformation from charming winter wonderland to wet grey nightmare that ruins your shoes. I caught a taxi on 8th Avenue. The driver was listening to Christmas carols on the radio and complaining about holiday traffic, and gave him the Hotel Carlyle's address. As we navigated through the chaos of delivery trucks, last-minute shoppers, and tourists who'd apparently never seen snow before, I thought about Fritz, precise, dignified, incapable of error when it came to his cooking, and wondered what kind of person would be stupid enough or desperate enough to use a master chef's Christmas goose as a murder weapon. Someone with a grudge against Pemberton, someone with a grudge against Fritz, someone who understood chemistry, cooking, and how to create a perfect frame. By the time we reached the Hotel Carlyle, I had more questions than answers, but that was fine. Questions were my specialty. Finding answers was what Wolfe paid me for, or would pay me for, if he actually paid me instead of providing room, board, and the occasional opportunity to solve murders with a genius detective and 6 highly trained guard dogs. I walked into the hotel's lobby, past the enormous Christmas tree that probably cost more than my hypothetical annual salary, and went to find Inspector Kramer and the scene of Fritz Brenner's allegedly poisoned Christmas goose. The Hotel Carlyle occupied the kind of Manhattan real estate that made ordinary people weep quietly into their tax returns. The building sat on East 76th Street like a monument to old money and older privilege, all elegant limestone facade and Art Deco details that screamed we were here before you were born and we'll be here after you're gone. The lobby smelled like expensive perfume, furniture polish, and the particular aroma of wealth that comes from knowing you never have to check the price of anything. The Christmas tree I'd passed on the way in was a 20-footer, decorated by someone with actual credentials in the field of ornamental horticulture, probably the same person who did the Plaza's tree and the Rockefeller Center display. Every branch was perfectly balanced, every ornament strategically placed, every light calibrated to create maximum festive impact without crossing the line into tacky. It was the kind of Christmas tree that made you feel simultaneously joyful and inadequate. I found Inspector Kramer in the hotel manager's office, which was less an office and more a shrine to understated luxury. The furniture was French, the carpet was Persian, and the manager, a thin, nervous man named Gerald Fitzpatrick, looked like he was contemplating whether insurance covered poisoned society dinners and ruined reputations. Kramer saw me enter and gestured toward a door. "Goodwin, about time. The kitchen's downstairs. I've got the hotel's executive chef waiting, along with her staff and enough witnesses to fill a courtroom. How's Pemberton?" "Alive, which is more luck than judgment. The doctors at Lenox Hill say if he'd consumed more than 2 ounces of that sauce, we'd be investigating a homicide instead of an attempted murder. As it is, he's got cardiac arrhythmia, severe gastric distress, and the kind of burning sensation in his throat that suggests alkaloid poisoning, probably aconitine, according to the toxicology preliminary." "Aconitine?" "Monkshood poison. Deadly as hell, fast-acting, and not something you accidentally put in a Christmas goose. Someone knew exactly what they were doing." "How specific is the preliminary?" "Specific enough that we're treating this as deliberate contamination by someone with chemical knowledge. Aconitine isn't something you buy at the corner pharmacy, Goodwin. You either extract it from monkshood plants, which requires laboratory equipment and expertise, or you synthesize it, which requires even more expertise. Either way, we're looking for someone with training. Medical, chemical, both, probably, or access to someone with both. Come on." He led me through corridors that transitioned from guest-facing elegance to service corridor efficiency, with the kind of architectural schizophrenia common to expensive hotels. We took a service elevator that dropped fast enough to make my stomach question its life choices, and emerged into the hotel's kitchen complex, a cathedral of stainless steel, copper pots, professional-grade equipment, and the kind of organized chaos that comes from running a high-end hotel kitchen during the Christmas season. The space was immaculate, despite the obvious activity. Every surface gleamed, every pot had its designated place, every piece of equipment looked like it had been maintained by people who took pride in their work. The kitchen was currently occupied by approximately 15 people, all of whom looked like they'd rather be anywhere else, which was understandable given that their workplace had just become a crime scene. A woman approached us with the kind of purposeful stride that suggested she was in charge and didn't have time for nonsense. She was in her 50s, tall and angular, with iron-grey hair pulled back in a severe bun, and the kind of calm, commanding presence that came from years of running professional kitchens where one mistake could ruin a dinner service for 200 people. Her chef's whites were spotless, her bearing military, and her expression suggested she was deeply offended by the universe's decision to complicate her Christmas week. "Inspector, this must be Mr. Goodwin." "Archie Goodwin. Yes. Your chef Thornhill?" "Beatrice Thornhill, executive chef. This is a disaster, Mr. Goodwin. A complete disaster. Fritz Brenner is an artist, one of the finest chefs I've ever had the privilege of working with. The idea that his preparation could harm anyone is not just wrong, it's impossible. Walk me through yesterday. Everything." She gestured toward a cordoned-off section of the kitchen, yellow police tape marking it as official crime scene territory. "Fritz arrived at 3 p.m. yesterday with his goose. The bird was fully prepared, ready for final roasting on Saturday. He brought everything: his own spice mixture, his own reduction sauce, his own ceramic serving vessel. He's very particular about equipment, which I respect completely. Quality tools matter. Where did he work? That station there, the one that's now sealed. I assigned him the premier workspace, marble surface, precise temperature control, adequate space for his mise en place. He worked alone as per his request. My staff assisted only with monitoring oven temperatures and timing protocols. Fritz is methodical. He doesn't appreciate interference. Who else was in the kitchen during his preparation? My sous chef Patrick Whitmore. He's been with me for 8 years. Completely trustworthy. 3 line cooks. Marcus Chen, Isabella Rodriguez, and Jean-Paul Mercier. 2 prep assistants, Kayla Johnson and Thomas Wright. All trusted employees. All thoroughly vetted. All background checked when they were hired. We run a professional operation, Mr. Goodwin. The Carlyle's reputation depends on absolute reliability. I don't doubt your operations quality, Chef Thornhill, but somebody got to Fritz's sauce, which means either your security has holes or someone very clever found a way around your protocols. Kramer spoke up. The sauce was sealed in a ceramic container Fritz brought from the brownstone, custom-made vessel, apparently. It was stored overnight in the walk-in cooler, door locked. Only 2 people had keys, Chef Thornhill and Theodore Pemberton. I looked at Beatrice. Why did the charity chairman have a key to your kitchen cooler? Her expression tightened fractionally, the kind of micro-expression that suggested this was a sore subject. Theodore Pemberton insisted on complete access to all foundation event preparations. He called it quality assurance and fiduciary responsibility. I call it micromanagement, bordering on obsession. He inspected everything: ingredients, preparations, presentations, plating arrangements. It was intrusive and unnecessary, but the Pemberton Foundation pays very well and books events regularly. Sometimes you tolerate difficult clients for business reasons. So Pemberton had access to Fritz's sauce all night. Technically, yes. But why would he poison his own dinner? That makes no sense. Unless he was the target, not the perpetrator. If someone wanted Pemberton dead, they'd need access to something he was guaranteed to consume. A sauce he knew he'd taste before the dinner? That's opportunity. But the container was sealed. Fritz sealed it himself with red wax, stamped with his personal monogram. I watched him do it. He's very traditional about presentation. Wax can be melted, resealed, and re-stamped if you know what you're doing. Anyone with basic tools and patience could manage it. Kramer pulled out a notebook. We're testing the wax for tampering evidence, but preliminary examination suggests it might have been compromised and resealed. The forensics team is running detailed analysis now. Who knew about the sealing procedure? Beatrice thought for a moment. Everyone who was in the kitchen yesterday. Fritz made rather a production of it, explained that it was traditional European technique, showed us the wax and the monogram stamp, sealed the container in front of all of us. He said it ensured authenticity and prevented contamination. Prevented contamination unless someone specifically targeted the seal. Who else was here yesterday besides the kitchen staff? She handed me a clipboard with multiple pages attached. This is the complete log of everyone who entered the kitchen between noon yesterday and 7 a.m. this morning. Hotel policy. We track all access for insurance and liability purposes. I scanned the list. Kitchen staff, hotel management, delivery personnel, and then some names that made me pause. Dr. Vincent Holbrook. Who's he? The Pemberton Foundation's medical advisor. He came by around 4:30 p.m. to review the menu for dietary concerns. Some of the Foundation's guests have allergies or medical restrictions. Did you show him Fritz's recipe? Yes. He specifically asked about the spice composition, said he needed to ensure no one would have adverse reactions. I provided him with Fritz's written recipe. It's standard practice for events this size. So he knew exactly what ingredients were in the sauce. Yes. Including the Syrian anise-flower. Yes. I made a note. Someone with medical training had access to the complete recipe, knew what ingredients to substitute, and could theoretically acquire or synthesize the appropriate poison. That was interesting. Who else? Gwen Pemberton visited around 5 p.m. She's Theodore's sister-in-law, his late brother's widow. She came to verify the seating arrangements, though honestly I think she came to irritate Theodore. They had a rather heated discussion in the hallway. About I couldn't hear everything, but I heard something about the Hampton property, and you'll never get your hands on it. It sounded personal and hostile. How hostile? Hostile enough that our security manager asked if he needed to intervene. Gwen told him she could handle her own family drama. Theodore told him to mind his own business, and they both left separately looking furious. Where was Fritz during all this? In the kitchen, finishing his preparations. He packed everything carefully, the goose in its roasting pan, the sauce in the sealed container, all his tools in a custom case. He labeled everything, placed it all in the cooler, and left around 6 p.m. Very professional, very methodical. Did he seem worried? No. He seemed satisfied, like someone who'd completed an important project successfully. I looked at the cooler, a massive walk-in refrigerator with a proper lock, temperature display, and enough space to store ingredients for a small restaurant. This locked overnight. Yes, I locked it myself at 8 p.m. after final inventory. The next person to open it was Theodore Pemberton at 7:30 this morning. With his key? With his key, yes. He arrived with his assistant, a young man named Geoffrey Lowell. Theodore insisted on inspecting Fritz's goose before Saturday's dinner. He said he wanted to verify the quality and ensure the foundation was getting value for its investment. Did he always do pre-event inspections? Always. Every event, every detail. He was obsessively controlling. Some people called it attention to detail. I called it pathological micromanagement. Did anyone try to stop him from tasting the sauce? I did. I told him the flavors wouldn't be properly developed yet, that tasting it cold would give him an inaccurate impression of the final product. He ignored me, opened the container. I heard the wax seal crack, poured approximately 2 ounces into a tasting cup, and drank it straight. What happened? Nothing immediately. He commented that it was acceptable, if somewhat exotic. He and Geoffrey left the kitchen. 20 minutes later, I heard the commotion in the lobby. Pemberton had collapsed. Guests were panicking. Someone was calling an ambulance. By the time I got upstairs, he was being loaded onto a stretcher, looking grey and sweating profusely. Where was Geoffrey during this? With Pemberton the whole time. He rode in the ambulance to the hospital. Kramer spoke. Lowell's in the banquet hall with the other witnesses. You want to talk to him? Yeah. Also anyone else who was here yesterday. I need a complete picture of who had opportunity to access that source. Beatrice gestured toward a door. The banquet hall is through there. I've kept everyone available as Inspector Kramer requested, though I should mention, one person who was here yesterday hasn't shown up today. Who? Rita Lansdowne. She's a journalist with the Herald Tribune. She bought a ticket to Saturday's dinner under a false name. Theodore banned her from all foundation events months ago, something about an unflattering article. But she was here yesterday asking questions about the menu, the foundation's finances, the guest list. When I heard about the poisoning this morning, I tried calling her. No answer. That was interesting and suspicious. A banned journalist investigating a charity shows up the day before the chairman is poisoned. Either very bad timing or very deliberate planning. Get me her contact information. I'll track her down. Already written it down. She handed me a business card. Rita's been investigating the Pemberton Foundation for months. Theodore was furious about it, threatened to sue her newspaper, called her editor, tried to get her fired. She's persistent though, very persistent. Sounds like motive. Or investigative journalism. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. I thanked Beatrice Thornhill for her cooperation and headed toward the banquet hall with Kramer following. The hallway was decorated with enough holly, ivy and evergreen garland to supply a small forest, and every door we passed had a wreath that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. The banquet hall itself was a Victorian Christmas fever dream. Garlands everywhere, candelabras on every table, enough seasonal decoration to make Charles Dickens weep with aesthetic overload. Approximately 20 people sat scattered among the tables, looking variously nervous, bored, annoyed, or guilty. Which was fine. Guilty was what I was looking for. I spotted Geoffrey Lowell immediately. He was young, mid-20s, wearing an expensive suit that didn't quite fit his anxious energy, and staring at his phone like it contained instructions on surviving a murder investigation. His hair was styled within an inch of its life. His shoes were polished to military standards, and his expression suggested he was reconsidering every life choice that had led him to this moment. I pulled up a chair across from him. Geoffrey Lowell? He looked up, startled. Yes? Are you with the police? I'm with the truth, which is occasionally more useful. Archie Goodwin. I work for Nero Wolfe, whose chef prepared the sauce that nearly killed your boss. Tell me about this morning. He set his phone down carefully. Mr. Pemberton wanted to inspect the goose preparation before Saturday's dinner. He said Fritz Brenner's reputation was 90% marketing and 10% actual skill, and he wanted to verify we were getting quality for the foundation's investment. We arrived at 7:30, went directly to the kitchen, and he unlocked the cooler with his personal key. Did he always carry that key? Always. He wore it on a chain with his pocket watch, one of those old-fashioned watch fobs. He was very proud of having access to everywhere and everything, said it was part of responsible stewardship. Who knew he'd be here this morning? Everyone. The entire foundation board knew. We discussed it at Tuesday's board meeting. Mr. Pemberton wanted everyone to understand that he personally supervised every aspect of the foundation's operations, including quality control for catered events. So anyone at Tuesday's meeting knew Pemberton would be tasting Fritz's sauce this morning? Yes. He even specified the time, 7:30 a.m., before the kitchen got too busy. How many people were at that meeting? 12 board members, plus staff. Maybe 18 people total. Names. He pulled out his phone, scrolled through something, and started reciting. Dr. Vincent Holbrook, the medical advisor. Gwen Pemberton, Theodore's sister-in-law and board treasurer. Pauline Mercer. She runs the grant review committee. Malcolm Strickland, the legal counsel. Harrison Delaney, the fundraising director. Sharon Wu, the events coordinator, plus various administrative staff and committee chairs. I wrote it all down. Any of them have problems with Pemberton? Geoffrey hesitated, then lowered his voice. Mr. Goodwin, Theodore Pemberton was brilliant at fundraising and terrible at personal relationships. He made enemies like some people collect stamps. If you're looking for people who had problems with him, you're going to need a longer notebook. Give me the highlights. He glanced around to make sure no one was listening. Dr. Holbrook and Theodore fought constantly. Holbrook wanted more funding for medical research grants. Theodore thought medical research was wasteful, said the foundation should focus on education and infrastructure. 3 weeks ago, Holbrook threatened to resign and take his donor network with him. How much money would that cost the foundation? Holbrook controls relationships with donors worth approximately $4 million annually. If he left, the foundation would lose roughly half its operating budget. That's a significant threat. It was an ultimatum. Theodore called his bluff, said no one was irreplaceable. Holbrook said some people were irreplaceable, and some people were just obstacles to progress. It got ugly. Who else? Gwen Pemberton. She and Theodore have been fighting since his brother died. There was a lawsuit over the estate. Theodore claimed his brother was coerced into changing his will shortly before his death. He wanted half of what Gwen inherited. The court ruled against him last month. He had to pay her legal fees plus damages. It cost him about $200,000. That would leave a mark. It left Theodore furious, and Gwen vindicated. She's been attending every board meeting since then, just to watch Theodore squirm. Yesterday's argument about the Hampton House was their latest battle. Theodore wants it. Gwen refuses to sell, and neither one will compromise. Anyone else with a grudge? Pauline Mercer. She runs the grant review committee with the kind of ethical rigor that makes everyone uncomfortable. Last month, Theodore overruled one of her grant recommendations, denied funding to a children's literacy program in Harlem. Pauline was convinced it was because Theodore was racist. She threatened to expose his decision-making process to the press and resigned publicly. Did she? Not yet, but she's been documenting everything. Every grant denial, every budget allocation, every decision Theodore made. She said she was building a case against him. A case for what? She wouldn't say, but the implication was corruption, or discrimination, or both. I made notes while Geoffrey fidgeted with his phone. Then I asked the obvious question. What about you? Did you have problems with Theodore Pemberton? He went pale, actually lost color like someone had adjusted his contrast settings. I work for him. Worked for him. I mean, I still work for him. He's not dead, but... Relax. I'm not accusing you. I'm asking if you had motive. Theodore was demanding, impossible to please. He expected perfection and punished anything less. I've been his assistant for 2 years. and I can't remember him ever saying thank you or good job, or anything that suggested he appreciated my work. But I didn't poison him, Mr. Goodwin. I was with him this morning. I watched him taste the sauce. I called the ambulance when he collapsed. If I wanted him dead, I wouldn't have saved his life. Fair point. What do you think happened? I think someone wanted Theodore out of the foundation and used Fritz's goose as the weapon. I think whoever did it knew Theodore would taste that sauce, knew the poison would work, and didn't care who got blamed as long as Theodore went down. That's oddly specific. That's logical. Theodore made enemies professionally and personally. Someone finally decided talking wasn't enough. I stood. Thanks for your cooperation, Jeffrey. Stay available. If you remember anything else, anything, call me at the brownstone. The number's in the phone book. He nodded, looking miserable. I left him there and went to find Inspector Kramer, who was examining the walk-in cooler with the concentrated attention of someone looking for evidence that would make his life easier. Learn anything useful, Goodwin? Yeah. Theodore Pemberton was a world-class jerk who specialized in making people want him dead. I've got at least 4 suspects with motives that would hold up in court. A medical advisor he was trying to fire, a sister-in-law he cheated, a committee chair he enraged, and an assistant he abused, plus a journalist who's been investigating him for months and mysteriously disappeared right after he got poisoned. That's a lot of suspects. That's what happens when you're universally despised. How long until your forensics team finishes with the source? Another 2 hours. They're doing a complete chemical analysis, identifying the poison, determining concentration, looking for fingerprints on the container and the wax seal. If we're lucky, we'll get something definitive. And if we're not lucky, then we've got attempted murder, no clear suspect, and a society charity dinner that's either going to be cancelled or turn into the most awkward event of the season. Either way, Fritz Brenner's reputation is on the line until we solve this. Then I better get back to the brownstone and brief Wolfe. He'll want to hear everything before he starts thinking. Thinking? That's what he does. I collect information. He processes it, and then he tells me who did it and why. It's a very efficient system. Sounds like magic. Close enough. I left Kramer at the hotel and caught another taxi back to West 35th Street. The snow was still falling. Manhattan was still beautiful in that temporary way that wouldn't survive the evening rush hour, and somewhere in this city, someone was very pleased with themselves for poisoning a charity chairman and framing an innocent chef. They wouldn't be pleased much longer. Wolfe was on the case, which meant their clever plan was about to become their worst nightmare. The brownstone was waiting, warm, secure, and full of guard dogs who were probably wondering why I'd been gone so long and whether I'd brought food. I hadn't brought food, but I'd brought information, which was the next best thing. I got back to the brownstone at 1:45 p.m., stamped snow off my shoes in the vestibule because Fritz would murder me if I tracked slush across his clean floors, and was immediately subjected to Caesar's security inspection, which consisted of him sniffing my coat, determining I smelled like hotel carpet and expensive perfume, and giving me a look that clearly said, "You've been consorting with strangers, and I'm disappointed in your choices." Mars performed a similar inspection from his position by the hallway radiator, though he was less judgmental and more curious. Apollo appeared from nowhere. He always did that, materializing like a ninja in Doberman form, and circled me once before deciding I was acceptable. Minerva watched from the stairs with her usual strategic assessment. Diana called down from the second floor, presumably giving the all-clear after checking my arrival through the bulletproof windows. And Loyal emerged from the kitchen with Fritz, the pit bull's steady presence providing moral support to a chef who looked like he'd spent the past several hours contemplating professional disgrace. Archie. Fritz's voice was tight, controlled, the kind of tone that meant he was managing fear through precision and routine. What did you learn? That somebody's clever, vindictive, and probably has medical training. Also that Theodore Pemberton was universally despised and collecting enemies like some people collect baseball cards. Come to the office. Wolfe will want to hear this once. We went to the office together, Fritz still wearing his chef's whites, Loyal padding alongside him like a brick-red guardian angel. Wolfe was behind his desk, a glass of beer at his elbow, his eyes half closed in that expression that meant he was thinking about something complicated and didn't appreciate being interrupted. But he opened both eyes when we entered, took in Fritz's expression and said, "Sit, both of you. Archie, report." I sat at my desk, Fritz took the red leather chair, and Loyal settled beside him with the kind of quiet dignity that made you believe everything would eventually be fine. I pulled out my notes and began. The Hotel Carlyle's kitchen is professional, secure, and run by a competent executive chef named Beatrice Thornhill. Fritz's goose was prepared yesterday afternoon, sealed in a ceramic container with red wax, and stored overnight in a locked cooler. Only 2 people had keys, Thornhill and Theodore Pemberton. This morning at 7:30, Pemberton showed up with his assistant Geoffrey Lowell, opened the cooler, and insisted on tasting Fritz's sauce despite Thornhill's advice. He consumed approximately 2 ounces. 30 minutes later, he collapsed in the lobby. Wolfe listened without interruption, his fingers interlaced over his middle desk drawer. The preliminary toxicology suggests aconitine poisoning, monkshood. Highly lethal, requires chemical expertise to extract or synthesize. The dose was carefully calibrated. Any more and Pemberton would be dead. Any less and he wouldn't have gotten sick. Someone knew exactly what they were doing. Who had opportunity? That's the interesting part. The entire foundation board knew Pemberton would be at the hotel this morning. He announced it at Tuesday's board meeting. They knew he'd taste the sauce. They knew the time. They knew the location. So anyone who attended that meeting could have planned accordingly. Names. I consulted my notes. Dr. Vincent Holbrook, medical advisor. He visited the hotel yesterday, asked to review Fritz's recipe for dietary concerns, and got the complete ingredient list including the Syrian anise-flower. He's had ongoing conflicts with Pemberton about foundation priorities, wanted more medical research funding. Pemberton refused. 3 weeks ago, Holbrook threatened to resign and take $4 million in annual donor relationships with him. Wolfe's eyebrows rose fractionally. A significant threat. Yeah. Pemberton called his bluff. Said he was replaceable. Holbrook didn't take it well. Who else? Gwen Pemberton, the victim's sister-in-law, widow of Theodore's younger brother, who died 6 months ago in a sailing accident. Theodore contested the will, claimed his brother was coerced into changing it, took her to court, lost, had to pay $200,000 in damages and legal fees. They've been fighting about family property ever since. Yesterday at the hotel, they had a loud argument about something called the Hampton House. Security almost intervened. Family resentment. Deep family resentment, the kind that makes Christmas dinners awkward and inheritance disputes nasty. Continue. Pauline Mercer, Grant Review Committee Chair. Ethical, rigorous, deeply offended by Pemberton's management style. Last month he overruled her recommendation to fund a Harlem literacy program. She accused him of racism, threatened to expose his decision-making to the press, and started documenting every questionable choice he made. According to Geoffrey Lowell, she's building some kind of case against Pemberton. What kind of case? He didn't specify, but the implication was corruption or discrimination or both. And the journalist? Rita Lansdowne, Herald Tribune. She's been investigating the Pemberton Foundation for months. Pemberton banned her from all foundation events, tried to get her fired, threatened to sue her newspaper. She bought a ticket to Saturday's dinner under a false name, was at the hotel yesterday, asking questions about the menu, the finances, the guest list. After Pemberton got poisoned this morning, she disappeared, not answering calls. Wolfe was silent for a long moment, his eyes closed, his massive frame settled into his chair like a boulder that had achieved enlightenment. Then, 4 suspects with motive, means, and opportunity. A medical advisor with chemistry knowledge, a family member with personal grudges, a committee chair with documented grievances, a journalist with professional interest in exposing foundation corruption. And all of them knew Pemberton would taste Fritz's sauce at precisely 7:30 this morning. Plus, Geoffrey Lowell, the assistant. He's been Pemberton's punching bag for 2 years. Constant abuse, no appreciation, public humiliation. That's motive. But he saved Pemberton's life. Yeah. Called the ambulance immediately, rode with him to the hospital. So either he's innocent or he wanted Pemberton alive for some reason. Maybe poisoning someone to death is messier than poisoning them to incapacitation. Possibly. Or perhaps Mr. Lowell had nothing to do with the poisoning and simply performed his duties as a competent assistant. Wolfe opened his eyes. Archie, what did you observe about the sauce container? Ceramic vessel, custom-made, sealed with red wax and stamped with Fritz's monogram. Beatrice Thornhill said Fritz made a production of sealing it, explained the traditional technique, showed everyone the process. The seal was intact this morning when Pemberton opened it. Intact. Yeah. Kramer's team is testing for tampering, but preliminary exam suggests the wax might have been melted and resealed. Wolfe looked at Fritz. Your sealing procedure, is it difficult to replicate? Fritz stirred, his voice gaining strength from technical discussion. Not difficult for someone with patience and basic tools. The wax must be heated to precise temperature. Too hot and it loses the monogram detail. Too cool and it doesn't seal properly. The stamp must be pressed firmly and held steady. It requires practice, but anyone could learn the technique. Including someone who watched you demonstrate it yesterday. Yes. Then, and your Syrian anise-flower, where did you acquire it? From Hassan Tariq at the Levantine Spice Company on East 42nd Street. I have purchased from Hassan for 15 years. He imports directly from Aleppo, guarantees authenticity, and I trust his quality absolutely. When did you make this purchase? Yesterday morning. I needed the anise flower for the final sauce preparation. I went to Hassan's shop at 9:45 a.m., purchased 2 ounces, brought it directly home, and used it in the afternoon. Did you test the spice? Of course. I always test spices before use. The color was correct. The aroma was correct. The taste was correct. If it had been contaminated or substituted, I would have noticed immediately. Wolfe tapped his desk once, his version of a eureka moment. Unless the substitution was perfect, unless someone replaced Hassan's legitimate anise flower with a mixture that looked, smelled and tasted identical but contained aconitine. Fritz went pale. You think someone tampered with Hassan's stock? I think someone with chemistry knowledge visited Hassan's shop before you did, purchased legitimate anise flower, and replaced the shop's supply with poison substitute. When you arrived, you unknowingly purchased the contaminated product. You brought it home, tested it, finding nothing wrong because the substitution was expertly done, and used it in your sauce. The poison was in your brownstone kitchen from the moment you made the purchase. The office was silent. Outside, snow fell past the bulletproof windows. Inside, a master chef contemplated how thoroughly someone had infiltrated his supply chain. Who would have such knowledge? Someone with medical or chemical training, someone who knew your supplier, someone who understood your purchasing schedule, someone who could visit the Levantine Spice Company before your arrival and execute the substitution without arousing suspicion. I spoke up. That's a short list, very short. How many people know Fritz buys from Hassan? Very few, Fritz said quietly. I do not discuss my suppliers publicly. It is professional courtesy. Other chefs might attempt to use Hassan's sauces, and I prefer to maintain exclusivity. So our poisoner either followed you to discover your supplier, researched your purchasing habits thoroughly, or had access to information about this household's routines. Wolfe finished his beer. Archie, call Dr. Vollmer. I need a toxicological consultation about aconitine, specifically how one would extract or synthesize it, what equipment would be required, and whether the process could be completed by someone with basic medical training. I picked up the phone and dialed Doc Vollmer's number. He answered on the second ring, sounding cheerful and slightly distracted. Vollmer. Doc, it's Archie Goodwin. Wolfe needs your expertise on poisons. Is someone dying? Someone almost died. Someone else might die if we don't figure out who's killing people with alkaloid chemistry. What can you tell me about aconitine? Monkshood poison? Nasty stuff. Diterpenoid, alkaloid, one of the most toxic plant compounds known. Fatal dose for humans is approximately 2 to 4 milligrams. Symptoms include burning sensation in mouth and throat, nausea, vomiting, cardiac arrhythmia, respiratory paralysis. Death usually occurs within 2 to 6 hours if untreated. How would someone acquire it? 3 ways. First, extract it from aconitum plants. Monkshood, wolfsbane, various species grow wild in mountainous regions. Second, synthesize it chemically, though that requires significant expertise and laboratory equipment. Third, purchase it from chemical supply companies, though that would leave a paper trail, and most legitimate suppliers wouldn't sell to individuals without proper credentials. Could a doctor extract it? A doctor with chemistry background and access to laboratory equipment? Absolutely. The extraction process isn't particularly complex if you know what you're doing. Grind the plant material, perform a series of solvent extractions, purify the alkaloid, concentrate it to appropriate strength. Maybe 3 or 4 days of work in a university chemistry lab. What about disguising it as something else? That's trickier. Aconitine is colorless and nearly tasteless in solution, but it has no distinctive appearance that would let you pass it off as a spice. However, if you mixed it with something that has strong color and flavor, like a concentrated spice powder, you could create a blend that looked and tasted normal while delivering a lethal dose. Could you make it look like Syrian anise-flower? If you ground genuine anise-flower, mixed in extracted aconitine, and blended it carefully, yes, absolutely. The color would match, the texture would be similar, and the strong licorice flavor of the anise would mask any residual taste from the poison. It's actually quite clever. I made notes while Volmer continued. Archie, whoever did this has sophistication. This isn't amateur hour. This is someone who understood chemistry, toxicology, and how to weaponize both. That's what Wolfe thinks. Thanks, Doc. Send him a bill. I'll add it to the collection he's been ignoring since 1952. I hung up and reported to Wolfe. He listened, nodded once, and said, "So, we are looking for someone with medical or chemical training, access to university laboratory equipment, knowledge of Fritz's supplier, and detailed information about Pemberton's habits. The pool of suspects narrows considerably." You're thinking Holbrook. I'm thinking Dr. Holbrook had means, motive, and opportunity. He has medical training. He presumably has access to Columbia's chemistry facilities through his position as medical advisor. He visited the hotel yesterday and obtained Fritz's complete recipe. He knew Pemberton would taste the sauce this morning, and he had powerful professional motivation to remove Pemberton from the Foundation. That's circumstantial. That's preliminary. Archie, I need you to investigate 3 things. First, contact the Levantine Spice Company. Determine whether anyone matching Dr. Holbrook's description visited yesterday morning before Fritz's arrival. Second, contact Columbia University's chemistry department. Determine whether Holbrook has requisitioned laboratory access recently. Third, locate Rita Lansdowne, a journalist investigating Foundation corruption who disappears immediately after the chairman is poisoned, is either a suspect or a source. Either way, I want to speak with her. What about Gwen Pemberton and Pauline Mercer? Bring them in as well. 5:30 p.m. Tell them I have information regarding the Pemberton Foundation that requires immediate discussion. Inspector Kramer should attend. This will conclude with either an arrest or an explanation, and he should be present for both. You're setting up a grand revelation. I'm setting up a comprehensive explanation that will identify the perpetrator and protect Fritz's reputation. The 2 goals are compatible. Fritz spoke from the red leather chair, his voice stronger now. Mr. Wolfe, I appreciate your efforts, but if my reputation costs someone their freedom— Your reputation cost nothing, Fritz. Someone used your artistry as a weapon. Someone infiltrated your supply chain and contaminated your preparation. You are blameless. The person who did this is not. I intend to demonstrate that conclusively. And if you cannot, then I will retire from detection and take up needlepoint. But that seems unlikely. Go prepare lunch, Fritz. Something simple. We have an afternoon of investigation and an evening of revelation ahead of us. Fritz stood, Loyal rising with him, and they returned to the kitchen. I heard pots clanging almost immediately. Fritz's way of processing anxiety through productivity. Wolfe looked at me. Well, Archie, you have 3 investigations to conduct and approximately 4 hours to complete them. I suggest you begin. What will you be doing? Thinking. It's what I do best. I grabbed my coat again, checked that I had all the necessary contact information, and headed out into the snow. The afternoon was going to be busy, tracking down chemists, journalists, and spice merchants, while Wolfe sat in his chair and assembled the pieces of a poisoning case that involved society charity dinners, Christmas geese, and someone who'd been clever enough to frame an innocent chef. By evening, we'd have answers. By evening, someone would be explaining themselves to Inspector Kramer. And by evening, Fritz's reputation would be restored, or I'd know the reason why. The brownstone's guard dogs watched me leave, Caesar from his radiator post, Mars from the hallway, Apollo from somewhere invisible, Minerva from the stairs, Diana from her window station. 6 sets of eyes tracking my departure, 6 dogs maintaining the fortress while Wolfe thought and I worked. It was a good system. It had solved murders before. It would solve this one too. I stepped into the snow and went hunting for truth. The Levantine Spice Company occupied a narrow storefront on East 42nd Street. wedged between a watch repair shop and a place that sold imported textiles. The window display featured brass containers, exotic labels in Arabic and French, and the kind of aromatic promise that made you want to cook something complicated just to justify the visit. A small bell chimed when I entered, and the smell hit me immediately. Cinnamon, cardamom, saffron, and about 50 other spices I couldn't identify but appreciated anyway. The proprietor emerged from behind a curtained doorway at the back. Hassan Tariq was in his 60s, short and compact, with a neatly trimmed grey beard and the kind of dignified bearing that came from running a specialized business for decades. He wore a burgundy vest over a white shirt, and his expression suggested he was both pleased to have a customer and curious about what brought me in during the afternoon lull. "Good afternoon, sir. How may I assist you?" I pulled out one of my cards, the ones that said Archie Goodwin, Confidential Investigations, and handed it over. "Mr. Tariq, I'm Archie Goodwin. I work for Nero Wolfe, whose chef Fritz Brenner is one of your regular customers." His expression shifted immediately to concern. "Is Fritz well? He was here yesterday, purchased Syrian anise-flower, very particular about quality, as always. Is there a problem with the spice?" "There's a problem with someone who poisoned it. Fritz is fine, but the man who ate his cooking is in the hospital. I need to know who visited your shop yesterday morning before Fritz arrived." Hassan's face went pale. "Poisoned? But that's impossible. My spices are the finest quality, sourced directly from—" "I believe you, Mr. Tariq, but I think someone came here before Fritz, purchased your anise-flower, and replaced it with a contaminated substitute. Then when Fritz bought from you at 9:45, he unknowingly got the poisoned product. I need to know who was here earlier." He was silent for a long moment, processing the implications. Then he moved to a ledger on the counter, old-fashioned record-keeping, handwritten entries in careful script. "Yesterday morning, let me see. I opened at 8 a.m. First customer was Mrs. Kowalski at 8:30. She buys black pepper and coriander every week for her restaurant. Second customer was a gentleman around 9:15. He purchased Syrian ice-flower, 2 ounces, same as Fritz would later purchase." "Describe him." Hassan consulted his memory with the precision of someone who'd spent decades observing customers. Tall, perhaps 6 feet, late 50s, early 60s, grey hair, very distinguished appearance, well-dressed, expensive suit, cashmere overcoat. He spoke with education, asked very specific questions about the anise flower's origin, appearance, and aromatic properties. I thought he was a chef, or perhaps a food importer. He paid cash, $50 exactly. I remember because most customers use credit cards now. "Did he give a name?" "No. He said he was purchasing for a private client who valued discretion. I found it unusual but not unprecedented. Some chefs prefer to keep their suppliers confidential." "Would you recognize him if you saw a photograph?" "Possibly. The light in the shop is not always ideal, and I see many customers. But his face was distinctive. Angular features, very precise bearing, almost military." I pulled out my notebook and sketched a quick description based on Hassan's details, then showed him what I'd written. "Does this match?" "Yes, very close, especially the part about precise bearing. He carried himself like someone accustomed to authority." "After he purchased the anise-flower, did you notice anything unusual about your stock?" Hassan frowned. "Now that you mention it, yes. After Fritz left, I was restocking shelves and noticed the anise-flower container was lighter than expected. I assumed I'd miscalculated inventory. But if this gentleman replaced my genuine product with contaminated substitute, then he took your real anise-flower, left poisoned material in its place, and Fritz bought the poisoned version 90 minutes later. It's elegant, methodical, and requires someone who knew Fritz's schedule and your operating hours." "This is terrible. Fritz's reputation. We'll be fine. We're solving this. But I need you to do something for me. Inspector Kramer from Homicide might visit later today. Tell him exactly what you told me. And if you remember anything else about that morning customer, anything at all, call the brownstone immediately." I gave him Wolfe's number, thanked him for his cooperation, and left the shop with the bell chiming behind me. The snow was falling harder now, and Manhattan was transitioning from winter wonderland to trudge through slush and question your life choices. My second stop was Columbia University's chemistry department, which occupied several buildings on the Morningside Heights campus and smelled like solvents, ambition, and the particular aroma of scientific research conducted by people who occasionally forgot to eat. I found the departmental office on the 3rd floor of Chandler Hall, where a graduate student named Emily Chen was managing the front desk and looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. Can I help you? I hope so. I'm investigating a case involving chemical poisoning. I need to know if someone's been accessing your organic synthesis laboratory recently. She looked skeptical. Are you with the police? I'm with the Truth, which is occasionally more useful. The police will be asking the same questions in a few hours. I'm just trying to stay ahead of them. I can't give out information about laboratory access without authorization. Can you tell me who I should talk to for authorization? She sighed, consulted a directory, and wrote down a name. Dr. Ephraim Langley. He's the department chair. His office is down the hall, room 317, but he's probably in a faculty meeting. I'll wait. I found room 3117, knocked, and was surprised when someone actually answered. Dr. Langley was in his 70s, white-haired and energetic, with a kind of enthusiastic curiosity that suggested he still loved chemistry after 50 years of teaching it. He invited me in, listened to my explanation, and became immediately intrigued. Aconitine poisoning disguised as a spice? That's sophisticated. Whoever did this understood both extraction chemistry and culinary substitution. You think they used our facilities? I think someone with medical credentials might have access to your laboratory for consultation or research purposes. I'm looking for anyone who requisitioned the organic synthesis lab in the past month. He consulted his computer, scrolling through access logs. We track laboratory usage for safety and insurance purposes. Let me see. Past 4 weeks organic synthesis lab. He paused. Interesting. Dr. Vincent Holbrook signed in 3 weeks ago, December 1st. He's not regular faculty, but he has consulting privileges through the medical school. Requested overnight access for what he described as pharmaceutical compound research. Stayed until 2:15 a.m., according to the security logs. What equipment did he use? According to the requisition form, rotary evaporator, separation funnels, heating mantles, standard glassware, exactly what you'd need for alkaloid extraction. Did he specify what he was researching? No. Consulting faculty don't have to provide detailed research descriptions unless they're publishing. He signed the safety protocols, listed the equipment he needed, and worked alone, perfectly legitimate by university standards. Could he have been extracting aconitine? Dr. Langley thought about it. With that equipment and overnight access, absolutely. If he had raw plant material, monkshood roots or leaves, he could have performed a complete extraction and purification in one session. The process is well documented in pharmaceutical literature. Any competent chemist could do it. Would there be records of what he extracted? Not unless he voluntarily reported it. We monitor safety compliance, not research outcomes. He could have extracted anything from aspirin to nerve agents, and as long as he followed proper disposal protocols and didn't cause safety incidents, we'd have no record of specifics. So Dr. Holbrook could have spent 8 hours extracting monkshood poison, purifying it to lethal concentration and taking it home in a vial, and you'd never know? Correct, though I sincerely hope that's not what happened. Me too, but evidence suggests otherwise. Thanks for your help, Doctor. If the police come asking, and they will, tell them exactly what you told me. I left Columbia with the third piece of Wolfe's investigative puzzle firmly in place. Hassan Tariq had seen someone matching Holbrook's description purchasing anise-flower before Fritz. Columbia's chemistry department had records of Holbrook accessing laboratory equipment, perfect for alkaloid extraction, and Holbrook had motive, opportunity, and detailed knowledge of both Fritz's recipe and Pemberton's tasting habits. The case was assembling itself with the kind of elegant precision that made Wolfe insufferable when he was right, which was always. My third and final task was locating Rita Lansdowne, the journalist who'd been investigating the Pemberton Foundation and had mysteriously disappeared after the poisoning. I tried her office at the Herald Tribune first, got transferred 3 times, and finally reached her editor, a man named Bernard Fletcher, who sounded harassed and caffeinated. Rita's not in today, called this morning, said she was following a major story and would file by deadline. That's all I know. What story? She didn't specify. Rita's investigating the Pemberton Foundation, some kind of financial irregularities. She's been on it for months. Very persistent, very thorough. If she says she's got something, She's got something. Mr. Fletcher, Theodore Pemberton was poisoned this morning. Rita was at the hotel yesterday, asking questions. Now she's unreachable. That looks suspicious." There was a long silence. Then, "Jesus, you think Rita's involved?" "I think Rita's either a suspect or a witness, and either way I need to talk to her. Do you have her home address?" He gave it to me. An apartment on West 73rd Street, walking distance from the brownstone. I thanked him, hung up, and caught another taxi through the snow. The afternoon was disappearing into early winter darkness, and I had approximately 90 minutes before Wolfe's 5:30 assembly was scheduled to begin. Rita Lansdowne's apartment building was one of those pre-war structures with decent maintenance and a doorman who took his job seriously. I explained I needed to speak with Miss Lansdowne regarding an urgent matter, showed him my investigator's card, and he reluctantly called up to her apartment. "Miss Lansdowne, there's a Mr. Archie Goodwin here to see you. Says it's urgent regarding—" He listened, nodded, and handed me the house phone. "She'll speak with you." Rita's voice came through, cautious but curious. "Mr. Goodwin, how did you find me?" "Your editor. We need to talk about Theodore Pemberton's poisoning and your investigation of the foundation. I work for Nero Wolfe, whose chef is currently being framed for attempted murder. Fritz Brenner didn't poison anyone." "I know, but someone did. And you've been investigating the Pemberton Foundation for months. You might know things that help us identify who. Can I come up?" Another pause. Then apartment 6C. "I'll buzz you in." The apartment was small but meticulously organized. Bookcases filled with reference materials, a desk covered in documents and photographs, walls decorated with framed newspaper clippings that chronicled Rita's investigative career. She was in her mid-30s, dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, wearing jeans and a sweater that suggested she'd been working from home all day. Her expression was guarded but intelligent, and she gestured me toward a chair while she remained standing. "You said Fritz Brenner's being framed. Explain." I gave her the abbreviated version: the poisoned anise-flower, the substitution at Hassan's spice shop, the laboratory access at Columbia, the suspects with various motives. She listened with the focused attention of someone who'd spent years interviewing sources and evaluating evidence. "When I finished," she said, "you think Dr. Holbrook did it? The evidence points that direction, medical training, chemistry knowledge, motive, opportunity. He matches Hassan's description of the morning customer. He has laboratory access records. He knew Pemberton would taste the sauce. It's comprehensive. It's also exactly what someone wanted you to think." That stopped me. "Explain." She moved to her desk, pulled out a thick folder, and handed it over. "I've been investigating the Pemberton Foundation for 14 weeks. Started as a routine profile piece. Local charity, prominent family, Christmas human interest story. But the financial records didn't add up. Programs that didn't exist, grants that were never distributed, money disappearing into administrative costs that couldn't be accounted for." I opened the folder. Inside were bank statements, tax filings, grant applications, correspondence between Theodore Pemberton and various institutions. The documentation was extensive, detailed, and damning. Theodore Pemberton was embezzling from his own foundation. I estimate somewhere between $12 and $15 million over 8 years. He created fake programs, forged grant applications, and pocketed the difference. The foundation was a criminal enterprise disguised as charity. Holy hell. It gets worse. 3 months ago, I interviewed a woman named Dorothy Hastings. Her son was supposedly a Pemberton scholar. Full ride to Columbia. 4 years covered by foundation funds. Except the foundation never paid Columbia anything. Mrs. Hastings went into debt financing her son's education. When she tried to contact Pemberton about the discrepancy, he threatened her with defamation lawsuits. Where is she now? Rita's expression hardened. Dead. Car accident, 2 weeks after our interview. Single vehicle collision on a wet road. Police ruled it accidental. I call it convenient timing. You think Pemberton killed her? I think Pemberton was capable of extreme ruthlessness when protecting his interests. Whether he personally arranged her death or simply benefited from lucky circumstances, I can't prove it either way. But the woman who could have destroyed his foundation died very suddenly, and the investigation died with her. Did you share this with authorities? I tried. District Attorney's office showed polite interest and did nothing. State Attorney General requested documentation and went silent. Pemberton has connections, Mr. Goodwin, political connections, social connections, media connections. He's donated to every major campaign in New York for a decade. Nobody wants to investigate a beloved philanthropist, especially one who can destroy careers with a phone call. Until someone poisons him. Until someone poisons him, she agreed, which is why I've been working on my story all day. Theodore Pemberton's poisoning means his foundation will be investigated thoroughly. The forensic accountants will find what I found. The prosecutors will finally have motivation to act, and I'll finally be able to publish everything I've discovered. You sound almost grateful someone poisoned him. I'm grateful justice might finally happen. I'm not grateful someone used Fritz Brenner as the weapon. That part bothers me. Bothers you enough to come to the brownstone at 5:30 and explain this to Wolfe? She considered. What's in it for me? Exclusive access to how we solve the case. Complete story rights. Your byline on the article that exposes both the poisoning and the foundation fraud. Deal. Give me your address. I wrote down the brownstone's location, told her to arrive at 5:30 sharp, and left her apartment. The snow was still falling. Manhattan was descending into rush hour chaos, and I had approximately 40 minutes to get back to West 35th Street and brief Wolfe before our assembly of suspects began. I caught one more taxi. The driver was complaining about the snow, the traffic, and the general unfairness of working during Christmas week, and made it back to the brownstone at 4:55 p.m. Caesar met me at the door with his usual security inspection, determined I smelled like universities, spice shops and journalist apartments, and gave me a look that clearly said, "You've been busy and I'm mildly impressed." Wolfe was in the office, a fresh bottle of beer open, his expression suggesting he'd spent the afternoon thinking productively. Archie. Report. I reported everything. Hassan's description of the morning customer, Columbia's laboratory access records, Rita Lansdowne's investigation into foundation fraud. Wolfe listened without interrupting, occasionally making small approving grunts that meant I'd done acceptable work. When I finished, he said, satisfactory. Dr. Holbrook visited the spice shop, accessed the chemistry laboratory, and had detailed knowledge of both Fritz's supplier and Pemberton's habits. He is either the perpetrator or has been extraordinarily unfortunate in his timing and activities. Rita Lansdowne says the evidence might be too perfect, like someone setting up Holbrook. Possible, but unlikely. Occam's razor suggests the simplest explanation is usually correct. Dr. Holbrook had motive. Pemberton was threatening his position and his principles. He had means, medical training and chemistry access. He had opportunity, knowledge of Fritz's schedule and the Foundation's dinner plans, and he had the sophistication to execute a plan that involved chemical substitution, precise dosing, and strategic timing. So you think Holbrook did it? I think Holbrook will have difficulty explaining why he visited Hassan's spice shop 90 minutes before Fritz, why he requisitioned organic chemistry equipment suitable for alkaloid extraction, and why he requested Fritz's complete recipe from Chef Thornhill. Those three facts, combined with his documented conflicts with Pemberton, create a compelling narrative. What about the others? Gwen Pemberton, Pauline Mercer, Jeffrey Lowell. They had motive but lacked means. Chemical sophistication requires training and access. Only Holbrook possessed both. The doorbell rang. I looked at the clock, 5:28 p.m. Our guests were arriving early. I went to answer the door with Caesar and Mars accompanying me, their presence providing security and intimidation in equal measure. Through the bulletproof glass panel, I saw Dr. Vincent Holbrook standing in the snow, looking dignified and slightly curious. I opened the door. "Dr. Holbrook, welcome. Come in." He entered, noting the dogs with professional interest. Impressive animals, Dobermans and a pit bull, excellent choice for household security. They're friendly once they decide you're not here to burgle the silver. This way. I led him to the office, where Wolfe sat behind his desk like a Buddha, preparing to deliver judgment. Holbrook took the red leather chair, settling in with the calm demeanor of someone who'd been summoned to many professional meetings and wasn't intimidated by any of them. "Mr. Wolfe, your assistant said you had information regarding the Pemberton Foundation?" "I have information regarding an attempted murder. We'll discuss the Foundation momentarily. Others are arriving." The doorbell rang again. This time it was Gwen Pemberton, elegant in a dark coat, her expression suggesting she was looking forward to whatever drama was about to unfold. then Pauline Mercer, rigidly professional, then Geoffrey Lowell, looking terrified, then Rita Lansdowne, carrying her leather satchel and a notebook, and finally, Inspector Kramer with Sergeant Stebbins, both looking like they'd rather be home watching television but were professional enough to attend anyway. By 5:45 p.m., the office was full. Holbrook in the red leather chair, Gwen on the couch, Pauline in a straight-back chair near the window, Geoffrey standing near the doorway, fidgeting, Rita seated at the corner with her notebook ready, Kramer and Stebbins by the door, official and observant. The dogs had distributed themselves throughout the room, Caesar near Wolfe's desk, Mars by the door, Apollo finally still near the window, Minerva on the stairs outside, Diana at her upstairs post. Loyal had emerged from the kitchen with Fritz, both of them standing in the hallway, listening. Wolfe surveyed the assembly, took a sip of beer, and began. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here to discuss the attempted murder of Theodore Pemberton, the systematic fraud perpetrated by his foundation, and the question of which crime is more offensive to civilized society. The answer may surprise you. Wolfe settled deeper into his chair, making it creak with the familiar complaint of furniture accepting significant weight, and folded his hands across his middle drawer in the gesture that meant he was about to deliver one of his famous explanations. The office was silent except for the quiet sound of snow hitting the bulletproof windows and Apollo's nails clicking softly on the floor as he shifted position near Pauline Mercer. Let us begin with established facts, Wolfe said, his voice carrying the kind of pedagogical authority that made you pay attention even when you didn't want to. Yesterday morning, Fritz Brenner purchased Syrian anise-flower from Hassan Tariq at the Levantine Spice Company. He brought this spice to the brownstone, tested it according to his standard protocols, and used it in the preparation of a Christmas goose sauce for the Pemberton Foundation dinner. The sauce was sealed in a ceramic container, transported to the Hotel Carlyle, and stored overnight in a locked cooler. He paused to sip his beer. This morning at 7:30, Theodore Pemberton opened the cooler, consumed approximately 2 ounces of the sauce, and 30 minutes later collapsed from aconitine poisoning. The preliminary conclusion was that Fritz had either made a catastrophic error in ingredient selection or had been criminally negligent in his quality control. Both conclusions are false. Fritz stirred in the hallway doorway, Loyal pressed against his leg. Fritz Brenner is incapable of the kind of error that would allow poisoned spice to enter his kitchen. He tests every ingredient personally. He maintains relationships with suppliers he has trusted for decades. He executes preparations with the kind of precision that would make a Swiss watchmaker weep with admiration. The fault, ladies and gentlemen, was not with Fritz. The fault was with someone who understood Fritz's routines well enough to infiltrate them. Wolfe looked at Dr. Holbrook. Yesterday morning at approximately 9:15 a.m., you visited the Levantine Spice Company. You purchased 2 ounces of Syrian anise-flower. You asked detailed questions about the spice's appearance, aroma and properties. You paid cash. And then, this is the critical detail, you replaced Hassan's legitimate anise-flower stock with a substitute mixture you had prepared. Genuine anise-flower powder, combined with extracted aconitine in carefully calculated proportions. Holbrook's expression didn't change. He sat perfectly still, watching Wolfe with the clinical attention of someone observing an interesting diagnosis. When Fritz arrived 90 minutes later, he unknowingly purchased your contaminated product. He brought it home, tested it, finding nothing obviously wrong, because your substitution was expertly done, and used it in his Christmas goose sauce. The poison was in this brownstone from the moment Fritz made his purchase. You didn't break in. You didn't tamper with sealed containers. You infiltrated the supply chain at its most vulnerable point. Kramer spoke from near the door. That's a serious accusation, Wolfe. Can you prove it? I can demonstrate it circumstantially, with sufficient weight to justify formal investigation. Dr. Holbrook, 3 weeks ago, specifically December 1st, you requisitioned overnight access to Columbia University's Organic Synthesis Laboratory. You used equipment ideally suited for alkaloid extraction, rotary evaporator, separation funnels, heating mantles. You worked alone from approximately 6 p.m. until 2:15 a.m. Would you care to explain what pharmaceutical research required 8 hours of uninterrupted laboratory access? Holbrook was silent. I thought not. You extracted aconitine from monkshood plant material, probably purchased through horticultural suppliers or collected from wild specimens. The extraction process is well documented in pharmaceutical literature. Any competent chemist could execute it, and you are considerably more than competent. You purified the alkaloid, calculated appropriate dosing, and prepared a mixture that could be blended with anise-flower powder to create an undetectable poison. Wolfe touched his beer glass. Yesterday at the Hotel Carlyle, you visited Chef Thornhill and requested Fritz's complete recipe. You claimed medical advisor responsibilities regarding dietary concerns. She provided the recipe, including the critical detail about Syrian anise-flower. You now knew exactly which ingredient to substitute and where Fritz purchased it. Circumstantial, Holbrook said quietly. Comprehensive, Wolfe corrected. Hassan Tariq will identify you as the morning customer. Columbia will confirm your laboratory access. Chef Thornhill will testify you requested the recipe. And the forensic analysis of Fritz's remaining anise-flower stock will reveal aconitine contamination. 4 separate pieces of evidence. Dr. Holbrook. Each one alone might be coincidence. Together they constitute a pattern. Gwen Pemberton leaned forward. Why would Vincent poison Theodore? Because Theodore Pemberton was destroying the foundation Dr. Holbrook had helped build. Because Pemberton was embezzling millions, creating fraudulent programs, and threatening anyone who questioned his authority. Because Dr. Holbrook tried legal remedies, complaints, audits, threats of resignation, and none of them worked. So he created an illegal remedy that would force investigation. Rita Lansdowne was writing frantically. Wolfe noticed and nodded toward her. Miss Lansdowne has been investigating the Pemberton Foundation for 14 weeks. She has documented extensive fraud, fake scholarship programs, forged grant applications, approximately $15 million in embezzlement over 8 years. She provided this information to authorities who declined to act. Theodore Pemberton had political connections that made him effectively untouchable. Wolfe's voice hardened, until someone made him touchable. Dr. Holbrook, you didn't try to kill Theodore Pemberton. You tried to expose him. The dosage you calculated was carefully calibrated. Enough aconitine to cause serious illness, but not enough to cause death. You knew that attempted murder of a prominent philanthropist would trigger the kind of investigation that Pemberton had successfully avoided for years. The poisoning was theater. The real objective was revelation. The office was completely silent. Even Apollo had stopped moving. You used Fritz Brenner as an unwitting instrument because his reputation guaranteed thorough scrutiny. If you had poisoned Pemberton anonymously, the police might have treated it as random violence. But poisoning through a prestigious chef's Christmas goose? That brings forensic analysis, health department investigation, media attention, and discovery of the foundation's financial irregularities. You committed one felony to expose another. Holbrook spoke for the first time since Wolfe had begun. His voice was steady, calm, with the measured precision of someone who'd anticipated this moment. This is an elegant theory, Mr. Wolfe. Do you have proof, or merely speculation supported by circumstantial coincidences? I have Hassan Tariq's identification, Columbia's laboratory records, and the forensic evidence that will emerge from testing Fritz's spice stock. I also have motive, means opportunity, and a pattern of behavior consistent with calculated revenge. That's sufficient for Inspector Kramer to obtain a warrant, conduct a formal investigation, and ultimately secure a conviction. Wolfe leaned back. But I should note, and this is important, that your crime, while illegal, was arguably less offensive than Theodore Pemberton's. He stole from charitable programs meant to help children. He created fake scholarships that left families in debt. He may have caused Dorothy Hastings' death when she threatened to expose him. Your crime was sophisticated, calculated, and designed to force justice when the legal system failed. A jury might find that contextually significant. Kramer moved forward. Holbrook, you want to respond to any of this? Dr. Holbrook sat silently for a long moment, his hands folded in his lap, his expression contemplative. Then he spoke, and his voice carried the weight of someone who'd made peace with difficult decisions. Theodore Pemberton was a thief, a fraud, and quite possibly a murderer. He destroyed the charitable foundation his family had built over generations. He stole from children, from families, from every person who donated money, believing it would be used for good. I spent 5 years trying to stop him through proper channels, board complaints, audit requests, threatened resignations. Nothing worked. He was protected by money, connections, and the reluctance of authorities to investigate someone who donated generously to their campaigns. He looked at Fritz in the doorway. I am genuinely sorry about your goose, Mr. Brenner. You are an artist, and I used your art as a weapon. That was wrong, but I knew that poisoning through a prestigious chef would guarantee the kind of investigation Pemberton had avoided for years. I calculated the dosage carefully, enough aconitine to incapacitate but not kill. I'm a physician. I took an oath. I don't murder people, Mr. Wolfe, but I do believe in justice, and sometimes justice requires unconventional methods. You're confessing. I'm acknowledging reality. Your evidence is comprehensive and accurate. I visited Hassan's shop. I prepared the contaminated spice mixture. I requisitioned the laboratory equipment. I knew Pemberton would taste that sauce at 7:30 this morning. Everything you said is true. Kramer pulled out handcuffs. Dr. Vincent Holbrook, you're under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy and criminal tampering. You have the right to remain silent. I waive that right. I'll confess completely and provide full documentation. But I want my confession made public, Inspector. Every word, including the evidence of Theodore Pemberton's embezzlement, the fake programs, the stolen donations, everything. If you try to bury the foundation fraud to protect his reputation, I'll give exclusive interviews to every newspaper in New York, starting with Miss Lansdowne, who's been investigating this for months and deserves the story. Rita was already writing. Dr. Holbrook, can you confirm the approximate amount Pemberton embezzled? Between 12 and 15 million over 8 years. I have documentation, bank transfers, forged signatures, fake grant applications. I've been collecting evidence for 2 years, hoping to present it to prosecutors. When they refused to act, I decided demonstration was more effective than petition. Kramer finished cuffing him gently, almost respectfully. You're still looking at serious prison time. I'm looking at justice, Inspector. Theodore Pemberton will be investigated, prosecuted, and convicted. His foundation will be dismantled. The families he defrauded will receive restitution. Dorothy Hastings' son might finally see justice for his mother's death. That's worth my career and my freedom. Wolfe spoke quietly. Dr. Holbrook, you committed a crime. You will face consequences. But I should note that your actions, while illegal, forced exposure of systematic theft that would otherwise have continued indefinitely. A competent defense attorney will present that context to a jury. Judge Thompson, who will likely hear your case, has a reputation for appreciating complicated motives and mitigating circumstances. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that attempted murder with non-lethal intent, committed to expose major fraud, might result in reduced charges and suspended sentence, particularly if you cooperate fully with the investigation into Pemberton's embezzlement. 3 years probation, medical license suspension, community service. That's my prediction. You'll be punished, but you won't be destroyed. Holbrook smiled, a tired, sad expression. Thank you, Mr. Wolfe. That's more optimistic than I expected. Kramer led him toward the door, Stebbins following. The dogs parted to let them through, Caesar and Mars watching with professional interest, Apollo finally settling down now that the tension was resolving. As they reached the hallway, Holbrook paused beside Fritz. Mr. Brenner, I truly apologize for using your Christmas goose as a murder weapon. It was a brilliant preparation, and it deserved better than to become evidence in a poisoning case. Fritz looked at him for a long moment. Then, very quietly, Dr. Holbrook, you used my art to expose evil. That is not the worst thing someone could do with a Christmas goose. I forgive you, but I do not approve. That's fair. They left, Kramer, Stebbins, and Holbrook walking out into the snow. The door closed behind them. The office was suddenly quiet, except for the sound of Rita Lansdowne's pen scratching across paper as she documented everything for tomorrow's headline. Gwen Pemberton stood, looking satisfied in a way that suggested Christmas had just become significantly more interesting. Well, that was dramatic. I assume Theodore's arrest is forthcoming? Wolfe nodded. Inspector Kramer will coordinate with the district attorney's office. Your brother-in-law will face charges of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. His foundation will be dissolved. His assets will be frozen for victim restitution. His reputation will be destroyed. Excellent. His claims to my Hampton house are now legally invalid, I assume. I'm not a lawyer, Mrs. Pemberton, but I suspect a criminal investigation will complicate his civil litigation considerably. Even better. Thank you, Mr. Wolfe. This has been the most entertaining Christmas season in years. She left, sweeping out with the kind of dramatic flair that suggested she was already planning how to redecorate the contested property. Pauline Mercer stood next, looking thoughtful. The foundation will need new leadership, ethical leadership. I'm recommending a complete board restructuring, transparent accounting, and legitimate charitable programs. Theodore destroyed what his family built. I intend to rebuild it properly. Admirable, Miss Mercer. She nodded and departed. Geoffrey Lowell remained, looking shell-shocked. I should have reported Theodore years ago. I should have gone to the authorities, told them about the fake programs, the embezzlement, everything. But I was scared, and he was very good at making people scared. Wolfe regarded him with something approaching sympathy. Cowardice is common, Mr. Lowell. The question is whether you'll continue being a coward or find your courage now. The prosecutors will need testimony. The families will need documentation. You can help or hide. Choose wisely. I'll help. I'll testify against Theodore, provide every document I have, cooperate completely. It's the least I can do. Then do it thoroughly. Good evening, Mr. Lowell. He left. Rita Lansdowne remained, still writing. When she finally looked up, her expression was triumphant. This is the biggest story of my career. Philanthropist's foundation exposed as criminal enterprise. Medical advisor poisons chairman to force investigation. Chef's Christmas goose becomes murder weapon. It's got everything: money, power, poison, justice, and holiday atmosphere. My editor's going to lose his mind. Will you write fairly? I'll write accurately. Dr. Holbrook committed a crime, but Theodore Pemberton committed worse crimes for longer. I'll present both truths and let readers decide who's the real villain. That's all anyone can ask. Good evening, Miss Lansdowne. She left with her satchel and notebook, probably already composing headlines. The office was finally quiet. Just Wolfe, me, Fritz in the doorway, and 6 guardian dogs distributed throughout the brownstone in their standard security configuration. Wolfe looked at Fritz. Your reputation is intact. Dr. Holbrook made that clear. You were an unwitting instrument, not a conspirator. By tomorrow, every society matron in Manhattan will want you to prepare their holiday dinners. I do not want every society matron. I want to cook for this household, and occasionally for people who appreciate artistry over status. Then decline most offers and accept a few. It's your prerogative. Fritz nodded slowly, then returned to the kitchen with Loyal following. Within minutes, I heard pots clanging, his way of processing the afternoon's drama through productive activity. I looked at Wolfe. So, Dr. Holbrook poisoned Pemberton to expose fraud. Pemberton stole $15 million from charity. Holbrook gets arrested, Pemberton gets investigated, and Fritz's Christmas goose becomes the most famous poultry in New York. That's quite a day's work. It's satisfactory. The correct person was identified. Fritz's reputation was preserved. Justice will be served, albeit through complicated legal proceedings, and we solved the case without anyone breaking into the brownstone or shooting through the bulletproof windows, which is refreshing. You want me to call Doc Vollmer and thank him for the toxicology consultation? Send him a case of wine. He'll appreciate that more than thanks. What about dinner? Fritz is probably making something elaborate to celebrate not being arrested for attempted murder. Whatever he prepares will be excellent. I have faith in his therapeutic cooking. I started organizing the case files, preparing for the inevitable follow-up interviews, testimony requests, and paperwork that would consume the next several weeks. Outside, snow continued falling past the bulletproof windows, covering Manhattan in white silence. Inside, the brownstone was warm, secure, and quietly victorious. The dogs settled into evening positions, Caesar at his radiator, Mars in second place, Apollo finally stationary near the couch, Minerva on the stairs, Diana at her window post, Loyal in the kitchen providing moral support to Fritz. 6 guardian dogs maintaining fortress security while Wolfe thought. Fritz cooked, and I documented another successful case. It was, all things considered, a very satisfactory resolution to a very complicated Christmas poisoning. The phone started ringing at 6:15 p.m., approximately 30 minutes after our assembly had dispersed into the snowy Manhattan evening. First call was from Inspector Kramer, who'd just finished booking Dr. Holbrook and wanted to confirm that Wolfe would provide testimony when the case went to trial. Absolutely, Wolfe said, his voice carrying that tone of civic responsibility he used when he actually meant, "This is annoying but necessary." Archie and I will both testify regarding our investigation, the evidence we collected, and the conclusions we reached. Dr. Holbrook's confession should make the prosecution straightforward. Nothing straightforward when you involve society, charities, and medical professionals, Kramer said. But yeah, this one's pretty solid. The district attorney's already opening a formal investigation into Theodore Pemberton's foundation. We're getting warrants for bank records, tax documents, grant applications, everything. By next week, Pemberton's going to wish Holbrook had used a higher dose. Has Pemberton regained consciousness? About an hour ago. First thing he did was demand his lawyer. Second thing he did was start screaming about suing everyone involved. The hotel, the foundation, Fritz Brenner, you, me, probably the mayor and the Pope, for good measure. His attorney told him to shut up and stop incriminating himself. It's not going well for him. Good. Also, Rita Lansdowne's story is running in tomorrow's Herald Tribune. Front page, above the fold. Philanthropist's foundation exposed as criminal enterprise. Medical advisor poisons chairman to force investigation. It's comprehensive, accurate, and going to destroy what's left of Pemberton's reputation. Miss Lansdowne earned her story. She investigated for months while authorities declined to act. Yeah, well, now the authorities are acting. The Attorney General's office just announced they're reviewing every charitable foundation in New York with annual revenues over $5 million. Pemberton's fraud apparently made everyone nervous about oversight. Your poisoning case just triggered a statewide audit program. Satisfactory. Anything else, Mr. Kramer? Just thanks for solving this before it turned into a media circus that made the department look incompetent, and for protecting Fritz's reputation. He's a good guy, didn't deserve to be framed. No, he didn't. Good evening, Inspector. Wolfe hung up, and immediately the phone rang again. This time it was Beatrice Thornhill from the Hotel Carlyle, her voice carrying relief and professional gratitude. Mr. Wolfe, I just heard from the police. Dr. Holbrook confessed. Fritz is completely cleared. I wanted to thank you for investigating so thoroughly. The Carlyle's reputation was on the line, but more importantly, Fritz didn't deserve to have his career destroyed by someone else's criminal scheme. Fritz's artistry speaks for itself, Chef Thornhill. The temporary suspicion couldn't have lasted. Perhaps. But in this business, temporary suspicion can become permanent damage. Rumors spread fast. I'm grateful you stopped them before they started. Please tell Fritz that the Carlyle would be honored to work with him again. Any event, any time, any menu he chooses. I'll convey that. Though Fritz is selective about his commitments. As he should be. Good evening, Mr. Wolfe. The phone rang 6 more times over the next hour. Journalists requesting interviews, society matrons requesting Fritz's services, foundation board members requesting advice about rebuilding the Pemberton charity properly. Wolfe endured the first 3 calls with visible irritation, then instructed me to take messages and decline everything that didn't involve actual payment or legal obligation. By 7:30 p.m., the phone had finally stopped ringing, and Fritz had finished whatever therapeutic cooking project he'd been pursuing. He appeared in the office doorway with Loyal beside him, looking more composed than he had since this morning's crisis began. Dinner is ready. Crown roast of pork with apple cognac reduction, roasted root vegetables, potato gratin, and a watercress salad. Also, I have made a proper Christmas goose, unstained by poison, investigation, or criminal masterminds. It will be ready for Christmas Eve dinner tomorrow. You remade the goose? Of course. I will not allow Dr. Holbrook's chemistry experiment to define my Christmas preparation. The new goose is perfect, better than the contaminated one actually, because I am now personally angry and determination improves cooking. We will eat it tomorrow evening, and it will be magnificent. Wolfe smiled, a rare expression that suggested genuine approval. Your pride is admirable, Fritz. We'll look forward to tomorrow's vindication. We ate in the dining room, Wolfe, Fritz and I, with all 6 dogs distributed around the table in their standard dinner configuration. Caesar near Wolfe's chair, hoping for the occasional dropped morsel. Mars near Fritz, receiving actual handouts because Fritz believed in rewarding loyalty. Apollo under the table, restless even while stationary. Minerva near the door, maintaining professional vigilance. Diana upstairs, still checking windows despite the reduced threat level, and Loyal beside Fritz's chair, steady and content. The food was extraordinary, despite, or perhaps because of the day's stress. Fritz had channeled his anxiety into culinary excellence, and the result was a meal that would have made lesser chefs reconsider their career choices. The pork was perfectly cooked. The cognac reduction was sophisticated without being pretentious, and the potato gratin achieved the kind of crispy, creamy balance that made you believe in benevolent deities who cared about starches. We were halfway through dinner when the doorbell rang. I went to answer it, with Caesar following, because he never fully trusted that visitors weren't secretly planning burglary. Through the bulletproof glass panel, I saw a delivery person holding an enormous arrangement of flowers, orchids, naturally, because apparently word had spread about Wolfe's horticultural obsessions. I accepted the delivery, tipped the messenger, and brought the arrangement into the office. The attached card read, "Thank you for exposing the truth and protecting innocent artistry. Your investigation serves justice better than legal proceedings ever could. Vincent Holbrook." I showed it to Wolfe. He read it, grunted and said, "Dr. Holbrook is either genuinely grateful or strategically cultivating character witnesses for his trial. Possibly both. Display the orchids in the plant rooms. They're phalaenopsis, not rare but respectable quality." The evening settled into comfortable routine. Fritz finished dinner and began preparing tomorrow's Christmas Eve menu. Wolfe retreated to his room with a book and a bottle of beer. I handled the remaining correspondence and phone messages, declining interview requests and accepting a surprisingly generous payment from Gwen Pemberton for services rendered in the exposure of my loathsome brother-in-law. By 10 p.m., the brownstone was quiet, except for the usual sounds: Fritz's kitchen activity, Wolfe's occasional chair creaking from his bedroom, the dogs' periodic movements as they rotated through security positions. Outside, snow had finally stopped falling, leaving Manhattan covered in that temporary white purity that wouldn't survive tomorrow's sunshine, but looked beautiful while it lasted. I was preparing to head upstairs when the phone rang, one last time. I almost didn't answer. It was late, and I'd dealt with enough journalists and society matrons for one day. But professional habit made me pick up. Nero Wolfe's office. "Mr. Goodwin." It was Dr. Holbrook, calling from what I assumed was the police station's courtesy phone. "I apologize for the late call. I wanted to speak with Fritz Brenner, if that's possible." "Hold on." I went to the kitchen, where Fritz was methodically preparing a chestnut stuffing that would apparently play a critical role in tomorrow's Christmas goose redemption. "Fritz, Dr. Holbrook's on the phone. Wants to talk to you. You up for it?" Fritz set down his knife, wiped his hands on his apron, and nodded. We went to the office, and I handed him the phone while staying on the line. "This is Fritz Brenner." "Mr. Brenner, this is Vincent Holbrook. I'm calling from the police station where I'm being held pending arraignment tomorrow morning. I wanted to apologize personally and directly for using your Christmas goose as a murder weapon. It was wrong, it compromised your professional standing, and it showed disrespect for your artistry. I'm genuinely sorry." Fritz was silent for a long moment. Then, "Dr. Holbrook, I accept your apology, but I want you to understand something. When you contaminated my spice, you didn't just create a weapon, you violated the trust between a chef and his suppliers, the confidence between a craftsman and his ingredients, the integrity of preparation itself. That violation is more offensive than the attempted murder. I understand. Do you? Because I work every day to maintain that integrity. I test every ingredient. I cultivate relationships with suppliers across 3 continents. I spend decades building a reputation that allows people to trust that when they eat my food, they're experiencing artistry, not danger. You destroyed that in one morning. You're right. I can't repair that damage." "No, you can't. But you can ensure that when you testify, when you explain your actions to prosecutors and juries and journalists, you make absolutely clear that I was blameless, that my preparation was perfect, that your crime exploited my excellence rather than exposing my failure. Do that, Dr. Holbrook, and I will consider your debt partially repaid." "I will. I promise. The world will know that Fritz Brenner is a master chef who was used as an unwitting instrument. Your reputation will not just survive, it will be enhanced. Then we have an understanding. Good evening, Dr. Holbrook. I hope your conscience allows you to sleep better than mine will." Fritz hung up with more force than necessary, then returned to the kitchen with Loyal following. I heard more aggressive pot clanging, which suggested Fritz was processing complex emotions through culinary violence against innocent cookware. I finished closing up the office, filing documents, locking cabinets, setting the security system. Outside, Manhattan was finally quiet, the post-storm silence that came when the city temporarily exhausted itself. Inside, the brownstone was warm, secure, and recovering from a day that had involved poisoning, investigation, revelation, and the complete destruction of a corrupt charitable foundation. The dogs were settling into their sleeping positions, Caesar at his radiator, already snoring softly, Mars in second place, equally content, Apollo finally stationary on his chosen spot of carpet, Minerva on the stairs, maintaining vigilance even while resting, Diana upstairs, having completed her final window inspection, Loyal in the kitchen with Fritz, providing emotional support through simple presence. 6 guardian dogs, 1 brownstone fortress, 1 genius detective, 1 master chef, and another case solved through methodical investigation, logical deduction, and the kind of persistent attention to detail that separated professional detection from amateur speculation. I turned off the office lights and headed upstairs, passing Minerva on the stairs. She opened one eye as I passed, assessed that I wasn't a threat to brownstone security, and went back to whatever dogs dreamed about when they weren't protecting eccentric detectives and temperamental chefs from the dangers of Manhattan society. Tomorrow was Christmas Eve. Fritz would cook his vindication goose. Wolfe would fuss over his orchids. I would probably handle more phone calls from people who wanted to congratulate us on solving a case that had exposed one of Manhattan's biggest charity frauds in recent history. But tonight, the brownstone at 918 West 35th Street was simply home, warm, secure, and victorious against the snow, the criminals, and the general chaos of New York in December. It was, all things considered, a very Wolfe Christmas indeed. Christmas Eve morning arrived with brilliant sunshine and temperatures cold enough to keep yesterday's snow from turning into slush, a meteorological miracle that made Manhattan look like a Christmas card, composed by someone who actually understood how snow was supposed to work. I descended to the office at 8:30 a.m., unusually early for me but apparently standard for the rest of the household, because Fritz was already in the kitchen preparing what he'd announced would be the Christmas goose that redeems all previous geese, living and dead. The smell was extraordinary, roasting poultry, herbs, something involving cognac and apples, and the underlying aroma of a chef who'd decided that culinary revenge was best served with perfect temperature control and expert timing. Caesar and Loyal were positioned strategically outside the kitchen door, hoping that Fritz's emotional state would manifest as dropped food. Their optimism was admirable, if historically unfounded. I made coffee, retrieved the morning newspapers from the front stoop, and settled at my desk to read Rita Lansdowne's front-page expose in the Herald Tribune. The headline was perfect. Society Philanthropists Foundation exposed as $15 million fraud. Medical advisor poisons chairman to force investigation. Below it was a photograph of Theodore Pemberton being wheeled into Lenox Hill Hospital, looking grey and defeated. The article was comprehensive, accurate, and devastating. Rita had documented every aspect of the fraud, the fake scholarship programs, the forged grant applications, the embezzled millions. She'd interviewed Dorothy Hastings' son, who confirmed that the Pemberton Foundation had never paid his Columbia tuition despite promising full funding. She'd obtained statements from 3 other families who'd been similarly defrauded, and she'd presented Dr. Holbrook's poisoning not as random violence, but as desperate justice when legal channels failed. The sidebar article focused on Fritz Brenner, renowned chef used as unwitting weapon in elaborate justice scheme. It explained the spice substitution, the laboratory extraction, the careful dosing, and it concluded with a quote from Dr. Holbrook's confession. Fritz Brenner is a master chef, whose artistry I exploited for purposes he would never have condoned. His preparation was perfect. My crime was using that perfection as a delivery mechanism for justice. I was halfway through reading when Wolfe descended from the plant rooms at 9 a.m., early for him, which suggested the orchids had either behaved perfectly or misbehaved so badly that he'd given up in disgust. He entered the office, navigated around Caesar with practiced precision, and settled into his chair with a satisfied grunt. "Good morning, Archie. Has the Herald Tribune arrived?" "Yeah. Rita's article is front page, comprehensive, accurate, and guaranteed to destroy Theodore Pemberton's reputation while enhancing ours. Also, 3 society matrons have already called requesting Fritz for their New Year's dinners. Fritz will decline. He's preparing our Christmas dinner and doesn't need additional obligations. I told them that. They offered progressively larger fees. The third one offered $5,000 for a single meal. Fritz will still decline. Money is not his primary motivation. Pride and professional satisfaction, both of which are currently being channeled into the reconstruction of his Christmas goose. The phone rang. I answered. Nero Wolfe's office. Merry Christmas Eve. Mr. Goodwin, this is Pauline Mercer. I wanted to update you on the foundation restructuring. The board met this morning emergency session and voted unanimously to dissolve the existing organization and establish a new charitable entity with completely transparent accounting and legitimate programs. Theodore Pemberton has been removed from all positions. His assets are frozen pending restitution claims. We're estimating that fraud victims will recover approximately 80% of their losses. That's better than most fraud cases. It's better than we expected. Also, we'd like to name the new foundation after Dorothy Hastings, the woman who died trying to expose Theodore's crimes. Her son approved the naming, and we think it's appropriate recognition. I think that's perfect. Mrs. Hastings deserves to be remembered. We're also establishing a scholarship program in her name, fully funded, fully audited, fully legitimate. If her son wants to return to Columbia, we'll pay his complete tuition plus compensation for the debt his family incurred when Theodore embezzled his original scholarship money. That's justice. That's what Dr. Holbrook wanted. He may have used illegal methods, but his objective was righteous. I hope the judge considers that during sentencing. Wolfe thinks he'll get probation, suspended sentence, license suspension, community service, 3 years maybe. Better than prison. Thank you for solving this, Mr. Goodwin, and thank Mr. Wolfe and Fritz Brenner. Without your investigation, Theodore might have continued his fraud indefinitely. She hung up. I reported the conversation to Wolfe, who nodded approvingly. Miss Mercer is competent and ethical. The new foundation will be better than the old one, which is appropriate justice. The morning continued with phone calls, correspondence, and the general administrative aftermath of solving a case that had exposed major fraud and destroyed a society philanthropist's reputation. By 11 a.m., I'd fielded calls from 6 journalists, 4 lawyers, and 2 representatives from the district attorney's office requesting testimony, scheduling. At noon, Inspector Kramer arrived personally, looking less harassed than usual. He let himself in. We'd given him a key years ago, partially for convenience and partially because he'd earned it through years of tolerating Wolfe's theatrical approaches to solving murders. The dogs knew him well enough by now to consider him acceptable, though Caesar still performed a cursory security inspection before allowing him into the office. Wolfe, Goodwin, Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, Inspector. Sit. Beer? God, yes. I got him a beer from the kitchen refrigerator. Fritz had stocked extra, knowing that post-case visits from Kramer usually involved both celebration and commiseration. Kramer drank half the bottle in one long swallow, then set it down with the satisfied expression of someone who'd just survived a bureaucratic nightmare. Theodore Pemberton was arraigned this morning. 15 counts of fraud, 8 counts of embezzlement, 3 counts of conspiracy, 2 counts of forgery. Bail set at $2 million. His attorneys arguing that he's not a flight risk, but the prosecutor pointed out that he has foreign bank accounts and a history of threatening witnesses. Judge denied bail. Pemberton spending Christmas in jail. Appropriate. Yeah, also Dr. Holbrook was arraigned on attempted murder charges. His attorney immediately proposed a plea deal, reduced charges to reckless endangerment and conspiracy in exchange for full cooperation with the Pemberton prosecution. The DA's considering it. Holbrook's offering to testify about everything, the foundation fraud, Pemberton's threats, Dorothy Hastings' death. If he cooperates fully, he might get 3 years probation and license suspension, as predicted. You're insufferable when you're right. I'm frequently right, Mr. Kramer. That's why you tolerate my methods. Kramer finished his beer. The commissioner wanted me to thank you officially, solving this before it became a media disaster about poisoned charity dinners and incompetent police work. Also, protecting Fritz's reputation. The department was getting calls from society matrons threatening to never cooperate with police investigations if we arrested their favorite chef. Fritz's innocence was obvious from the beginning. To you, maybe. To the rest of us, it looked like a chef who'd made a catastrophic mistake. Your investigation proved otherwise. Archie's investigation. I merely assembled the pieces he collected. Still insufferable. Wolfe smiled. Will you join us for dinner this evening? Fritz is preparing a Christmas goose of such magnitude that it requires witnesses. What time? 7 p.m. I'll be here. He left, taking another beer for the road because Fritz always encouraged guests to drink properly, and Kramer had earned alcoholic compensation for enduring Theodore Pemberton's arraignment. The office was quiet again, except for the sounds of Fritz's kitchen activity and the occasional movement of dogs rotating through their security positions. I spent the afternoon finishing case documentation, preparing for inevitable testimony requests, and generally ensuring that our investigation would be presentable to prosecutors, defense attorneys, and judges. By 5 p.m., I'd completed everything necessary and retired to my room to change into something appropriate for Christmas Eve dinner with a genius detective, a temperamental chef, 6 guard dogs, and a police inspector who'd solved too many murders to be impressed by normal holiday celebrations. At 6:30 p.m., the doorbell rang. I answered, expecting Kramer, but found instead a delivery person holding a package approximately the size of a briefcase. The return address was Columbia University Medical Center, and the package was addressed to Fritz Brenner. I signed for it, brought it to the kitchen, and found Fritz putting final touches on what appeared to be the most magnificent Christmas goose in the history of domesticated waterfowl. The bird was golden brown perfection, surrounded by roasted chestnuts, caramelized apples, tiny Yorkshire puddings, and a sauce that probably had its own passport and aristocratic lineage. "Fritz, package for you, from Columbia Medical Center." He set down his basting brush, wiped his hands on his apron, and opened the package carefully. Inside was a handwritten letter on official medical center stationery, along with a small wooden box. Fritz read the letter first, his expression shifting from curiosity to surprise to something approaching respect. "It's from Dr. Holbrook. He's written an apology, formal, comprehensive, and specific. He acknowledges using my artistry as a weapon, violating my professional integrity, and damaging the trust between chefs and their suppliers. He says he's arranged for Columbia Medical Center to establish an annual culinary scholarship in my name, full funding for one student to attend the Culinary Institute of America. The scholarship will be awarded to students demonstrating both technical excellence and ethical integrity." That's significant. It's more than significant. It's acknowledgement that my reputation matters, that my integrity has value, that what he did was wrong despite his righteous motives. And this. Fritz opened the wooden box. Inside was a chef's knife, handmade, carbon steel, with a handle of dark wood and brass fittings. The blade had an inscription, "To Fritz Brenner, master chef and unwitting instrument of justice. Your artistry deserves better weapons than mine." Fritz was silent for a long moment, holding the knife with the kind of careful attention that suggested it was both apology and responsibility. Then he set it carefully on the counter and returned to his goose. "Dr. Holbrook understands craft. This knife is exceptional quality, probably $800, custom-made, perfectly balanced. He chose well. You going to use it?" "Eventually, after I've decided whether accepting it means forgiving him or simply acknowledging his gesture. Right now, I'm focused on this goose, which will be ready in 30 minutes and will prove that my reputation survives criminal chemistry." Kramer arrived at 6:55 p.m., carrying a bottle of wine that probably cost more than his monthly salary, and looking more relaxed than I'd seen him in weeks. We ate in the dining room, Wolfe, Kramer, Fritz and I, with all 6 dogs distributed strategically around the table, hoping for handouts. The meal was extraordinary. The goose was perfect, crispy skin, tender meat, complex flavors that suggested Fritz had channeled his professional pride and personal vindication into every aspect of preparation. The chestnuts were sweet and earthy, the Yorkshire puddings were architectural marvels, and the sauce was sophisticated enough to make French chefs weep with admiration. We ate in appreciative silence, the kind of silence that comes from experiencing food so good that conversation seems insulting. Halfway through, Kramer raised his wine glass. "To Fritz Brenner, master chef and survivor of criminal chemistry. May his geese always be properly spiced and his reputation forever untarnished." We drank. Fritz acknowledged the toast with a small nod, then returned to his meal with the satisfied expression of someone who'd reclaimed his professional dignity through culinary excellence and sheer determination. By 9 p.m., dinner was finished, the dishes were cleared, and we'd retired to the office for coffee and the kind of comfortable conversation that comes after solving murders and eating magnificent food. The dogs were settled in their evening positions, Caesar at his radiator, Mars nearby, Apollo finally stationary, Minerva on the stairs, Diana at her window post, Loyal beside Fritz's chair. Outside, Manhattan was celebrating Christmas Eve with the usual mixture of joy, commerce, and alcohol-fueled decision-making. Inside the brownstone at 918 West 35th Street We were celebrating justice, redemption, and the fact that despite poisonings, embezzlement, and corrupt philanthropists, Fritz's Christmas goose had emerged victorious. Kramer left at 10 p.m., slightly drunk on Fritz's wine, and significantly more optimistic about humanity than he'd been when he arrived. Fritz retired to the kitchen to prepare tomorrow's Christmas breakfast, because apparently one magnificent meal per day wasn't sufficient demonstration of culinary mastery. Wolfe retreated to his room with a book and a bottle of beer. And I sat at my desk, writing the final notes for the case that would be known in our files as the Christmas Goose Affair, the investigation where a medical advisor poisoned a corrupt philanthropist, a master chef's reputation was attacked and redeemed, and justice was served alongside roasted chestnuts and vindication. The brownstone was quiet, except for the usual sounds. Fritz's kitchen activity, Wolfe's occasional chair creaking, the dogs' soft breathing as they maintained their eternal vigilance. Outside, snow had started falling again, covering Manhattan in fresh white promise. Tomorrow was Christmas. The day after, the legal proceedings would begin. Testimony, trials, sentencing. Theodore Pemberton would face prosecution for $15 million in fraud. Dr. Holbrook would plead guilty to reduced charges and probably receive probation. The Pemberton Foundation would be dissolved and rebuilt under ethical management. And Fritz Brenner would receive dinner requests from every society matron in New York, most of which he'd decline because he was selective about his commitments and skeptical about people who measured artistry in dollars. But tonight, the brownstone was simply home, warm, secure, and victorious. 6 guardian dogs maintaining the fortress, 1 genius detective solving crimes through relentless logic, 1 master chef proving that reputation could survive criminal exploitation, and 1 assistant documenting it all so that future clients would know what they were getting when they hired Nero Wolfe. It was, all things considered, the perfect Christmas Eve.